Welcome to Computer Science Principles. Follow along with the curriculum at bjc.edc.org. Unit 3, Lists. Lab 2, Page 3, Data Types. Okay, so as we get back into the BJC curriculum, Unit 3, Lists. Lab 2, Data Types. So a data type, just as the name suggests, what kind of data something is. Each programming language provides some primitive built-in data types. The primitive types in Snap are number, could be a text string, boolean, list, command, reporter, and predicate. But we haven't used the last three as data types yet. You can get a reminder of Snap's primitive data types from the pull-down menu of the is blank a blank block shown right. So here you can see is blank is input A and then blank. So is it a number? Is it a command? Is it a reporter or a predicate? And so this entire thing is a predicate, so it's going to report true or false. Abstract data types such as noun phrase are custom data types that exist only in the mind of the programmer. So that was a conceptualized thing. That was abstraction. For example, your noun phrase in Lab 1 constructs a data type that joins three text strings from various lists. Similarly, prepositional phrase constructs a data type made out of a preposition and a noun phrase. If you were collecting data on your classmates for a yearbook, you might want a student constructor. For your contacts list app, you will create a contact data type. On this page, you will use a point constructor to simplify your draw shape project. So thinking out loud, Gamal joins Betsy and Alfie's discussion about using a list of coordinates to make a drawing of a letter. Gamal says that he thinks that they had trouble because of all of the item of blocks and how confusing it gets. Betsy says yes, an expression like item 2 of item 1 of A gets confusing fast. Gamal says, well, we could define a new data type called point. So this is just a new block that they've created that contains an x coordinate and a y coordinate. So Gamal's built this point x comma y. So this is a custom block with two input numbers, and all that it does is it reports a list with an x comma y, and those are the two inputs. It's reporting a list with an x comma y. Betsy says, well, that block is trivial. It isn't going to make the rest of the program any shorter. Point does the same thing as list. So if this custom block is only reporting a list with the two inputs, then it really is just doing exactly the same as list. So this whole idea is about trying to get away from item 1 of list or item 2 of item 1 of list, and trying to replace it with some abstract data type called point, and this block is called a constructor, and it's supposed to allow you to then start considering these things in a little more real terms. So point as a custom block makes sense. Point followed by two blanks is probably going to be an x and a y, because point is a coordinate on a chart, on a plane. And so when we do this in computer science, we almost make things a little more manageable, a little easier to control. Next, Betsy says, so we could also make an x coordinate and a y coordinate blocks so that the drawing script would have things like x coordinate of item 1 of A, which is list A. So if A is a list, item 1 is going to bring back one row of that list. So the first primary bucket, which is containing a list, it's containing the xy values. So x coordinate of the xy that's given to it is going to be item 1 of that thing. So I know this is a little confusing, and even for me learning this for the first time, I had to read this many times, and I still do have to read it many times. But this is looking at not only an abstract data type, that is our constructor block that's holding two things, but now it's also looking at a selector as well. So x coordinate of this thing is called a selector because it's choosing one component of the point. So this x coordinate of block is choosing this thing right here, and the y coordinate of list is choosing this thing right here. So those are selectors. So three things are coming to the surface here. We've got abstract data types, which are custom blocks we create to hold a particular piece of data. In this case, it's called point. Then we've got constructors, which are the actual custom blocks that's holding this abstract data type. And then we have selectors, which are going into the constructor block, choosing the abstract data type and selecting one piece of data from that. Okay, so they give an example here of Betsy's two other blocks, the x coordinate of and then list. So x coordinate of points, that's the point list, and all it's doing is reporting the first of that point list. So the point list in this case is just going to be the x comma y, because item 1 of point is just going to be the x value of the coordinates, the coordinate pair, and then y coordinate of point is going to report the second item, so it's going to report the y coordinate of point. So for you to do, improve your Unit 3 Lab 2 draw shape project from the previous page using Betsy's and Gamal's ideas. Okay, so let's just refresh our memory what this Unit 3 Lab 2 draw shape script actually does. If I clear it and then activate it, it's going to draws all of these points, connects them up, goes back around, joins it up, jumps to the middle, and then draws the centerpiece of this as well. So it does all of this by running a for each loop, and it looks for item 1 of point, and so on and so on and so on. And there's two lists that we have. We have list A, variable A, which contains a list, and all of these points. Well, these are points, even I said it, but it's thinking about it in terms of lists. So the first new thing that we just learned was an abstract data type called point. So we need to create a constructor block, so which is really just a regular custom block. We're going to call it point, and then I'm going to call it x, and then y are going to be the two inputs. Now this is a reporter block. I'm going to call it an operator. Press OK. Change both the x and the y to number inputs. So the x and the y both become number inputs. And then what we want this thing to do is to report the list, which has two values, x and y. So as we just said, this constructor block really is just doing the same as what list does. List on its own just reports the x and the y values. So if list just reports that, and now we're reporting whatever list is, it's doing exactly the same thing, except after I press OK and go and find this, it's a lot easier to think about, because now it says point x and y. So I'm going to reproduce this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to reproduce this 11 times. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So those can be like the ones on the top. I'm going to fill them in a minute and then drag them up there. And then duplicate again. 1, 2, 3. So let me just complete all of these for set A first. So I'm just going to put in all the numbers that I see. So -50. Next one is 20. Next one is -10. 120. 10. 120. 50. 20. 30. 20. And then the next row, 20, 50, -20, 50. So I'm just jumping through them, -30 and 20. So all of these now, I just copied all of these numbers up at the top. So if I drag all of these things out, so these are just lists, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in these constructor blocks, which contain the abstract data type point. So this data type, we just made it up. We just called it something that is reasonable, something that's memorable, called point. All right, so we filled this one up. Okay, so next we're going to do exactly the same thing. Let me just duplicate this thing. But this is for list B. Duplicate it 3 times. Just fill in these numbers. Remember, my numbers came from me just figuring out where this triangle should go in the middle through sensing. Your numbers might be different, which is absolutely fine. All right, so I'm going to throw out these lists again, and keep in mind that my constructor block for point is doing exactly the same as list is doing, except now it's obvious what this piece of data is. It's obvious that it's a point, whereas before it was list. And a list could be for anything. So an abstract data type living inside a constructor block makes it very easy for us to know what it is. And so there we have that. Now, let's think, what else does Betsy say? Well, in fact, first, we're told to improve it using Betsy's and Gamal's ideas. And so Betsy's idea was, so we could make an x-coordinate of constructor block, or really it's a selector block, and then also a y-coordinate of. Okay, so let's go back. As I've come back and I'm looking at this, like, let's think about it. Is this script still going to work, even if I've changed these constructor blocks to be called point, and I've created this abstract data type called point? Is it still going to work? Well, it should still do, because if I clear it and run it, it's still item 1 of A is still looking for item 1 of A is here. So that's doing this inside piece. And then item 1 of this thing is the -50. So it's still finding the X and the Y's. But what the rest of Betsy's idea is to create these selector blocks for these two things, so that instead of having item 1 of A, have something called X coordinate of and Y coordinate of. So that's going to mean that we have to create 2 more reporter blocks, which we're going to call selector blocks because they're choosing a particular piece of data from each of these constructor blocks. So let's call it X coordinate of, and then this is point of the point that we're going to get. So point is up here. So if I press OK now, point itself is a list. So we should really say it's a list over here. So there we go. And this thing needs to report this stuff up here. So it's going to report this, except let's just really think about this. So item 1 of whatever the point is. So keep in mind that this is really going to bring back this first point up here. It's really going to bring back this first point. And so item 1 of this point, now notice I'm going to drag point down, because then this itself could be an input for here. So let me just apply this, press OK. Let me drag in that X coordinate of, and now this becomes the input. So X coordinate of item 1 of A is going to give us the -50. And then we need to do the same for the Y coordinate to get the 20. So make a block. It's an operator reporter. Y coordinate of point. And again, point is going to be a list, is an input, and it's a list. And I need it to basically report this stuff, except item 1 of A, which is really just bringing back the first point. It's bringing back this stuff up here. It's bringing back this right here. So that's going to become our input, and point is going to come right here. So let's apply, press OK. Now go get the Y coordinate of, and then Y coordinate of this thing. So X coordinate is always bringing back the first value of whatever XY list is input. Y coordinate is always bringing back the second value of whatever the point is that goes in. So even though this says item 1 of A, that's just really because item 1 is the first primary bucket, is the first entry in this list. Whereas the bit where it searches for the second the second item is right here of point, which is going to be the y value. So now I can get rid of each of these, go to the xy, and I can drag in, go to the x of that, go to the y of that. But if I duplicate the xy's, there's something else that's kind of special with these as well. So I'm duplicating them and putting them right here, is that inside of our for each point, glide to item 1 of point. So that's glide to the x value of point and glide to the y value of point. So instead of these two things, look, I'm just pulling them out. Instead of these two things, I can say, I can basically say go to the x value of point. So instead of item 1 of this, I'm now going to drag in, go to the x value of point, because point is containing the xy values. And then the same with the y. And then I can drag out this and say, go to the y value of the point. So if I get rid of the old stuff, this is now making more sense. Instead of item 1 of item 1 of A and item 2 of item 1 of A, this is now making more sense. So we've gone for each point of A, glide to the x coordinate of the point, comma, y coordinate of the point. So that's making much more sense. Now, if we keep going through this code, trying to make it a little more clearer with these selector blocks, after it's drawn this for each point, we need it to go back to the first one. So instead of go to item 1 of item 1 of A and item 2 of item 1 of A, that's just really the x coordinate of the first point and the y coordinate of the first point. So it's basically the same as this. So I'm going to drag them in. Duplicate, duplicate. So there we go. We're starting to do really, really well with this right now. So after it's done that, we now need it to go to item 1 of the B list and item 2 of item 1 of the B list. So I'm going to pull these two things out. So this is where we're starting to go through these coordinates in the second list, in the B list. So instead of x coordinate of item 1 of A, it's almost the same. But instead of item 1 of A, we're going to go to item 1 of B. And the y is going to be, duplicate, is going to be item, y coordinate of item 1 of B. So it's the first point in B. So that's also looking good. Going to trash these things right here. Next, if I move up a little, instead of glide, so this is after it's put the pen down, now it's doing each point within the B list. So each point, so I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. So each point within the B list. So instead of item 1 of point and item 2 of point, I'm going to choose to duplicate this and duplicate this. Now, sometimes this might be a little buggy, but this point originally came from here. So let me just take out these 2 points, and although it's called the same thing, the item is called the same thing. I'm just going to drag it from this spot right here. So that piece should work. It should draw all around all of these 3 points. Then at the end, it wants it to glide to item 1 of item 1 of B. Well, item 1 of B is the first point, and item 1 of that is the x coordinate. Item 1 of B is the first point, and item 2 of that is the y coordinate. So I'm going to pull these 2 things out. I'm now going to duplicate, well, actually I could just duplicate this. This has exactly what we want. We want the x coordinate of the first B point, and then also we want the y coordinate of the first y point. So if I trash these things here, we don't need them anymore. So this is what we had to do. We had to clean up the script as Gamal and Betsy asked. So I'm just going to move everything up a little. So you know what, I could even connect those there for a little more space. Now we're going to run this and see if it works. So keep in mind we created these abstract data types called point. The block itself is the constructor block, and these x coordinates of and y coordinates of blocks. Keep in mind the input is a list, an xy list with just one xy point inside there. And this is going to select the first coordinate and select the second coordinate. So select the x value and the y value of those points. These are selector blocks. So let's clear it, see if it still works. So everything looks good here. It's working. It's even doing the middle piece. And as we look through this code, it's a little more obvious what each thing is. It's a little more meaningful. Okay, so the next part of this is to make a general draw shape block. So this is a command block that draws any shape based on a list of coordinates using the constructor and selectors designed by Gamal and Betsy respectively. So let's go back to our script and remember that we need to create this draw shape. So this was for draw A, and at the moment there's like a lot of stuff on my screen, so I'm going to create a block and I'm going to call this just draw A. Draw A. And it's a command block and we're drawing, so I'll leave it as draw A. Then what I'm going to do is just put all of this stuff inside there. And maybe I can actually separate this right here and get rid of the clear, because maybe I don't always want to clear the entire board when I press this block for draw A. So everything here is inside draw A. Notice there's no input into this block. So if I apply it, press OK, go to pen, here is draw A. Now if I clear the board and press draw A, we'll notice it draws an A. But our real mission is to create a draw shape block. And this needed a list of coordinates. And it was a command block that also drew. So coordinates we were told to set as a list. So that's going to give us a list of coordinates. And we needed it to do stuff. So let's try and compare what our draw A does with what we need our draw shape to do. So one of the obvious differences is that draw A does not have an input, whereas draw shape does. Also here, which is a little trickier, is that the letter A has, when I decided to draw this, I separated it into two lists, A list and B list. The B list was for the inside stuff, which helped me separate the two lists and have this pen up section right here so the pen could move without drawing between them. But let's just think, if I duplicate this and move it over, and then let's just close down the draw A, let's think about how we can possibly use one set of coordinates to draw everything. So if we assume our letter doesn't have an inside piece like this letter A has a triangle up there, then what we would just need to do is we would need to get rid of all of this stuff, which is all about our list B. So let's assume that is only one set of coordinates and that is not an inside piece. So if inputs come in, if the input coordinates come in and that's a list, we would need it to go to the X, and X would be the X coordinate of item 1 of A. Well, instead of A, that could be item 1 of your coordinates. So that would choose the first point, because item 1 of coordinates is going to be an XY pair, is going to be a list. So those two values are going to be a list. So item 1 of that is going to be the first point. And then the X coordinate of that first list, that first XY, is going to be the X coordinate. The Y coordinate of that is going to be the second value of the first item, which is your Y coordinate. And so our selector blocks are now being useful to draw this shape. So let's just trash these two A's. Now let's keep thinking. For each point of A, well, A is the list, but if we're inputting a list, then it would just be whatever the coordinates list. So for each point of the coordinates, glide 1 second to the X coordinate of the point and also to the Y coordinate of the point. So these points don't need changing, because point is the item of the list, and list here is our input into this custom block. Next, glide 1 second to the X coordinate of item 1 of coordinates, the coordinate list, and then also to the Y coordinate of item 1 of coordinates. So thinking about it, these selector blocks, the X coordinates of and the Y coordinates blocks, have really helped us move from draw A, draw the letter A, to now draw any shape when given a set of coordinates. So if I press apply and OK on this, and then pull in the draw shape, you'll notice the difference between draw A and draw shape is that draw shape is expecting a list. So if it's expecting a list, let's give it a list. Let's forget about the set of B points, which are the middle triangle, but let's just take this list up here. Duplicate this list right here. So this is the list of points that draws the outline for the letter A. So if we drag that and drop it in, draw shape is now given a set of inputs, an input which is a list, and this is going to then take on the name of coordinates, which is the name of this field right here, coordinates. So if I clear the board and now click on draw shape, it's now using these points, and it's using our selector blocks and our constructor blocks and the point abstract data type, and it's drawing it. So this did great, worked exactly as planned. If we take out some of these points, let's just actually reduce it. Let's shrink this thing. Let's keep going. So let's say we got, well, let's give it 4 points actually. So let's say that these points are negative 50, 50, followed by 50, 50, followed by 50, negative 50. Can you guess what it's going to draw? Followed by negative 50, negative 50. So if we try this out right now, clear it, and then this is the shape, which we're going to put inside. We've got a list of coordinates, and click on it. It's now drawing a square because the coordinates I chose were in each of the quadrants, and it just drew them. So not quite a letter, but it did draw a shape based on the inputs being a set of coordinates. So all good. All right, so let's go back to this. What does it say? So it says make a general draw shape based on any list of coordinates using construct. So we pretty much did this. You know, if we were given a list of coordinates that drew the letter I, then that would work. So let's just see. So this just shows you how to set the input slot to a list, which we've already done. Take it further. Make a list, a new list of lists with coordinates to draw a different letter or shape. Check to see that your draw shape block works with the new list. Well, we just did this with the square. And then it says, if you made other letters, write a draw message block that takes a list of letters and uses draw shape several times to draw a message. Okay, so to make this real as easy as possible, I'm going to draw the word high. So HI. And so if I clear this board right now, if I change this list, instead of it being negative 50, 50, and then let's think 50, 50, let's try and narrow this a lot. So instead of it being there, let's make it be negative 30, 50, and then it can go down to negative 30. So let's just think about what this is going to do. So I'm going to clear this, press this now. So it's almost like this new list is making the letter I. So I'm dragging this out. I'm now going to create a new set variable. So make a variable. I'm going to call this I. I'm then going to set I to this list right here. So let's move everything down a little. Let's push up set I to this. I'm going to move out my clear button. So basically I has been set to these points. Now I actually must remember to click it to initialize it as well. So if I separate it and then click, so now I has these points, which is great. Okay, clear the board. Also don't really need to see I, the value of I, but just keep in mind that when I draw this, when I draw shape I, so if I click that in, if I put that in there, if I press it, we're now going to see where exactly the I is. That's pretty important because the next thing that I need a list of points to make the word, the letter H next to it. So if I duplicate this, the letter H is going to look like it's two sticks and then the crossbar in the middle. So I need to think exactly where this can go. So for now, I'm going to turn on sensing, and I'm going to show where my mouse X and Y is. So if I want the letter H to start over here, so this is when I had to break away from the computer for a moment, take a post-it, I drew out the letter H, and I tried to figure out the coordinates where I would want each of the corners of these line segments to go. And so I've got them on this post-it right now. I'm going to try and copy them in. So the first point at the top left is going to be at negative 170, comma 50. The next one is then going to be negative 150, 50. Then we're going to drop down to negative 150. So I'm going to speed this up right now. Okay, so basically I created this list with all the coordinates I drew out on the post-it note. And so this list should be good enough to make me an H. So inside variables, I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to call it H. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to set H to this list. I have to click it because at the moment over here it's showing its value is 0. I don't want it to be 0. I want to set it to those. So that's now happened. If I move these things down, move the set H2 at the top. So now if I clear the board, we don't need to show the value of H. If I draw the letter I, I've got I inside this draw shape. So it does that. That's great. Now if I replace this I with H and press it, it now starts drawing the H. So maybe the crossbar in the middle is a little wide. Might want to fix that. Otherwise, it still says hi. So now the mission becomes, how do I get it to write each of these? How do I get it to write H and then write I? Especially if H and I could now be part of a list. So this is where we end up with lists of lists. So H, which is all of these points, I, which is all of these points. How do I get it to draw each of these? And that's where the key lies. It's in how we just presented that question to ourselves. For each item of this list, how do I get it to draw each item? So for each item, so we have a block for that, for each item. So if we start off with this, for each item of list, well, what's the list? Here's the list. Duplicate. So for each item of this, now each item is actually each of these letters, so we could rename item with the word letter. So for each letter of this list, do this, duplicate it. For each of them, draw the shape H and then draw the shape I. So for each letter of this list, and letter is just another way for us to conceptualize what each item is. Each item is in fact a letter. We need it to draw the letter for each of them. So this right here will draw the word hi. And there we go. It's going, and this time it's doing it the H first and then the I, because we have them in that order. And so when it does the for each, it's looking at item 1, which is letter 1, and then it's looking at letter 2, and then after it's done letter 2, it stops and it's finished. The curriculum has been brought to you by Beauty and Joy of Computing in association with UC Berkeley, also the National Science Foundation, EDC, and the SET program at the New York City Department of Education.